All right, Brian, it's time. It is time to dive into the Notre Dame quarterback battle. And this is an interesting spot. It's a spot that Notre Dame hasn't been in quite some time for a multitude of different reasons that we're going to dive into. But when you look at it big picture, it's a really big offseason for Notre Dame's quarterback room
Yeah.
for a bunch of different reasons. So, a lot of it much anticipated. We have been screaming from the rooftops that we want a little bit of continuity in that room. And for the first time in a while, they're not going to the transfer portal to look for a starting quarterback in South Bend. So, Brian, kick us off, man. Quarterback battle in South Bend 2025.
It's a season of transition, Trevor, and there's the normal transition that happens when you lose a quarterback whose career comes to an end, and then you've got to move on to somebody else. And so obviously there's that. It's a normal transition from one quarterback to the next, the heir apparent. It's a year of transition to where, if we're being honest, there hasn't been a lot of quarterback battles. Like I've said last year, look, if Tyler Buchner outplays Sam Hartman every day, he's going to start. But he's going to have to thoroughly outplay Sam Hartman because they didn't bring Sam Hartman in here to be a backup quarterback. 2022, there wasn't really a battle. I mean, I guess if Drew Pine would have outplayed Tyler Buchner, he would have started, but that was not going to be a real competition. He just wasn't as good as Tyler was. 2021, it was Jack Cohn. It was going to be his job. They gave lip service to a battle. Wasn't a battle. We all knew that, and there's nothing wrong with that because those guys weren't ready to beat him out. And then obviously in 2019 and 2020 and 2019, there wasn't a battle either because Ian Book was going to be the starting quarterback. So you really go back to all the way to 2018 is the last time there was a real quarterback battle. And I don't even know how real that was because Brandon Wimbush was going to be the starter to start the season. The question was, how was he going to play? And could Ian Book play well enough in fall camp to make the coaches be comfortable putting him in the lineup if Brandon faltered, which is exactly what they did. They didn't bench Brandon Wimbush after, I think it was the Vanderbilt game, because he wasn't playing well. It was because he wasn't playing well in the system they were asking him to run, but Ian had shown a proficiency that they liked in running that offense, and that's why they made the change. It's the two things together, because if you don't bench one quarterback that you know is really good at least one thing for another quarterback who you don't think can play any better, right? You have a guy that has proven himself to say, hey, look, in practice, and of course in the camping, or was it the Citrus Bowl the year before, that against LSU when he came off the bench, hey, this guy's got some chops to him. He made a start the year before against North Carolina. So there was a level of experience there. But you go all the way back to 2018, the last time Notre Dame had a real quarterback battle. And what I mean by a real quarterback battle, one where we didn't know who the quarterback was going to be. Like I said, 2022, there was a battle, but we all knew it was going to be Buchner unless he was just awful. There was a quote-unquote battle in 2023, but we all knew it was going to be Sam Hartman unless he was just not good or Buchner just played out of his mind. And last year we all knew it was going to be Riley Leonard, no matter how much the coaches said he had to win the job. Like, no, he didn't. Come on. Like, he was starting, and he should have been. We haven't had a real quarterback battle since maybe 2018, maybe. And you could even go back all the way to really to 2016, to where there was one where we didn't have a pretty good idea of who the starter was going to be on day one of the season. And they didn't, I mean, it was Kaiser and Malik. They rotated series that first game against Texas. Point is, it's been a long time, and that's the transition we're going to, where this is a real, surefire, no doubt about it, quarterback battle with three guys who all have a chance to win the job. We could debate, is it an equal chance? Is this guy going to get more of a push? Is that guy going to get more of a push? But the reality is, the guy that plays the best from now, or actually really from a week ago, when they all got back, started working out again, to the start of the season is going to be the starter. There's no guy that's way up here, and if you're going to beat him out, you got to play way better than he does. That's not the case. That'd be the case if Riley was coming back, but that's not the case now. It's who's going to win the job. And the reality is, Trevor, is the battle's already started. I mean, it started as soon as the season was over with. Leadership, getting together for workouts, who's putting in the work in the weight room, who's doing what they need to do in the classroom, who's showing leadership in the locker room, those type of things. That started already. And basically everything that they do from here on out is going to be evaluated. Things that the quarterbacks may not even know as part of the evaluation should be part of the evaluation. Who's the most attentive in meetings? Who's the most on time for meetings? Not in a butt-kissing way, but in a preparation way. So-and-so gets there early, gets his notepad out. He starts going over some questions that maybe he might have, some thoughts he might have, some things he was working on in the room. So hey, coach, I was watching this film. I got a couple questions for you. Who's the guy that's the most bought into that? Who's the guy that's putting in the most work in the weight room? Who's the guy that's leading in the weight room? All those things are put into the evaluation of this battle, Trevor. And it's really going to – and the reason it's important is because how the quarterback battle goes is going to not only, obviously is going to determine the direction the offense goes, because they all have different traits. And there's a shift that we're going to talk about here in a minute about some changes that are going to be happening. But even within that, there's going to be some unique changes in different aspects of the offense, depending on who. Like, there's going to be things you do with CJ that you maybe don't do as much of with others. There's going to be things you do with Kenny that you may not do as much of with others. There's things you're going to do with Steve that you may not do as much of with others. There's going to be routes one guy likes better than the other, and then the other guy likes better than the other. All those things are going to factor into it. But there's also the aspect that the heart and soul of your team is going to be developed through this battle. Keeping the locker room unified. And all those type of things are all part of this quarterback battle and the transition that Notre Dame is really making this offseason. And the quarterback, as I've said before, your team is a reflection of your head coach and your quarterback more than anything else, unless you have a very unique personality like a Manti. Then it's a little bit different. And the unique personality combined with a redshirt freshman quarterback is why Manti became the face of that program, not your quarterback. I've said this before. Why did Notre Dame have a different mindset in 2015 than they did in 2016? Because in 2015, everybody knew who the leader of that team was in the offseason. It was Malik. And then when what happened in 2015 happened and you didn't know who that leader was going to be in 2016, and Malik was the way he was, and then Deshaun was the way he was, and one guy did it the way that the coaches said they wanted a leader to be, and the other guy didn't, but they went with the other guy who didn't as a starter, fractured the locker room. Because of the way the process went down. And that's the risk you always run in these situations. And so that's where Notre Dame is, and that's why this matters. Because if you don't do it right, you can end up causing some problems. But if you do it right, you build an even stronger team in the locker room. Your football character becomes even stronger. And then also I think that the fact that they are going with someone they recruited, I think also has benefits. And that's the other part of this transition is they're moving away from the portal and going strictly with, we recruited you all three for a reason. Because and it's now like, look, and players understand, look, we know why Riley got brought in. We know why Sam got brought in. We know why Jack got brought in. But why are they bringing in a portal quarterback now? Steve's a junior. Steve's going to be a senior. Kenny's going to be a junior. CJ's going to be a sophomore. Like, is this just what we're doing now? Is this who we are now? The fact that they're showing commitment, hey, we believe in you guys. We're not going to go to the portal because we believe in you guys, is a statement to the rest of the team too that, hey, guys, these three, these are our leaders. We're bought into them, and I think that also helps with the buy-in that you're getting from the team. Is we're going with the guys that we recruited, we developed, and you're hoping that the era of portal quarterbacks is over. It was good for Notre Dame. They don't go 11-2 in 2021 if Jack Cohn doesn't transfer in. They flat out do not. They do not go 10-3 in 2023 if Sam Hartman doesn't come here. You can talk about how he was disappointing and all these other things you want, and certain parts maybe were, but the reality is if you think the 10-3 season was disappointing, imagine what it would have looked like if you didn't have Sam Hartman, because I promise you it would not have been as good as 10-3. And you are definitely not playing for the national championship in 2024 if you don't go get Riley Leonard or another portal quarterback. But now you're at the point where you don't need to do that anymore, and it's time to go get these guys and show, like, to me, it's you're building continuity. These receivers have now been with these guys for the most part for 2 years, 3 years. You've got guys that were recruited with these guys. I mean, C.J. Carr had such a big hand in a lot of these kids on offense being recruited to Notre Dame. You know, Kenny's had a role, Steve had a role in those type of things, but C.J. was the leader of that 24 class. He was a big reason why a lot of those 24 guys. And you and I remember, because there was a period of time when Dante Moore basically ended his silent commitment to Notre Dame, and they didn't get Kenny till November. There's a long period of time where C.J. Carr was the guy that played a big role in recruiting the 2023 receivers like Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. Well, not Jordan Faison as much, but KK Smith, you know, Braylon James, guys like that. So CJ had a big role in that. And like Steve has done what he's done, the sacrifices he's made for the team. It's now you're sort of saying, hey, we're going with you guys. We trust you guys. And I think that really impacts the locker room in a favorable manner, that the portal days are over because it's not needed anymore. And I think that's the sign of faith that this coaching staff showed in this. And it's exciting to for me, because I do think the talent is there for it. It's time to make that move to where portal was necessary. I supported going and get Riley Leonard, but it's time to move past that and build your own. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this battle. That more than anything else is is probably the first reason that I'm looking forward to this battle. And then of course you start looking at, okay, but who's going to be that guy?
You know, the thing that makes this quarterback battle so intriguing for me is, one, Notre Dame now has the opportunity, barring if Steve wins the job and has a Heisman-esque type of season, you're going to have a back-to-back starter in South Bend at quarterback for the first time since Ian Book in 1920. And one thing that I've always said is consistency at the quarterback position is something that I believe is needed. Now, in this day and age, I think it's unrealistic to have a 4-year starter at quarterback, but the one and dones, it's really tough to build any sort of continuity with your team. 2, I'm going to be really interested to see how the coaches handle this. We've seen with other position groups what happens when position battles aren't handled correctly. So Gino Guidugli, Mike Denbrock, Marcus Freeman are going to have interesting roles when it comes to this battle, because, Brian, to your point, if it's done incorrectly, that's when locker rooms can start to separate. But if it's done correctly, it unifies the team because they know that they're going with the correct person. So I'm excited. I'm excited to jump into this. It's going to be an ongoing discussion all throughout the offseason, because at the end of the day, we don't know when a quarterback is going to be named the starter. And I think that's another interesting aspect to this. As much as it would be easy to say, all right, well, after April 12th, we know who the starter is going to be. We might have a good idea, but in a good world, in an ideal world, all 3 of the quarterbacks ball out in the spring. They all play really well in the spring game, and they go into the summer and the fall camp with a spoil of riches at quarterback, ideally. So for me, it's going to be interesting to watch all of it unfold, Brian. It's going to be really interesting to watch it all unfold.
It is. And the other thing too, Trevor, that's going to be interesting to unfold is the offense is going to look different moving forward. You're not going to see the same offense we saw with Riley Leonard. We're not going to see the same offense we saw with Sam Hartman either, or Tyler Buckner. 3 very different quarterbacks to different degrees. And Riley and Tyler were a lot more alike than Sam was, but then Tyler only started 3 games in 2022. And now you look at it and it's you're going to have a different type of kid, but we don't know which type it's going to be. So we're certainly going to see some changes at the position, and who wins the job is going to have a big role in that, Trevor. I mean, and I do believe also that we're starting to see the type of quarterback Mike Denbrock wants. Now, Mike Denbrock did not have any role in recruiting the 3 quarterbacks on the roster, but I'm quite confident in saying that when I look at the type of quarterbacks that he has recruited since he's got here, there's this notion that Mike Denbrock wants a dual threat quarterback. And I think that's true in the sense that all coaches like a guy that can run and scramble and make plays with his legs. But the number one priority that Mike Denbrock wants in a quarterback is the ability to dominate from the pocket. Now, if you have a guy that can dominate from the pocket, that's also athletic and mobile and can avoid pressure and scramble and run like Jaden Daniels, that's phenomenal. I don't think Mike Denbrock would choose otherwise a Desmond Ridder type of player. He wants a more natural passer. But if he gets that kind of guy, he'll develop them and turn them into what they did with Desmond Ridder, which was a high draft pick, a guy that threw for over 3,000 yards. So I think you're going to start to see the transition of what Mike Denbrock wants this offense to look like. And you and I talked about this. He did what he had to do this past year, Trev. Now it's the time to see, okay, but what do you want to do? And if you look at the first 4 games, really the first 5 games, you'll see a lot of things in there that are a lot different than what we saw later in the year. Why? Because early in the year, and I think it was Sean Davis that brought this up to me, but he made the point, he's like, we were talking about just the reasons that I didn't think Denbrock was building the offense the way that it really should around Riley early. And he goes, do you think part of this is Riley Leonard's fault? So, well, what do you mean by his fault? He goes, do you think that was part of the conversation they had when he came in is, hey, coach, I want to develop more as a pocket passer? Well, that's probably a really good point. That probably happened. But then after the bye week, it was like, okay, look, we got to win games. And this is how we're going to win games. I know you better. I know what you – because I was told that Riley Leonard no one's going to be shocked by this, Trevor. He's a bit of a people pleaser. So hey, Riley, what do you think about this concept? Oh, coach, I love it, man. I love it. It's good stuff. Well, what do you think about this, Riley? Oh, coach, man, it's good stuff, man. I love it. But then you realize, like, no quarterback loves everything. Every quarterback has things he likes and things he doesn't like. Peyton Manning, John Elway, Tom Brady, Dan Marino, all of them. But Riley would never say what he does and doesn't like. So what Denbrock had to do is he had to evaluate what he does well. And then you eventually saw a shift, but it takes games for that to happen. And then you saw what they kind of turned into. But early in the year, we saw some things from the pass offense schematically that I thought really played a big role in us understanding who Mike Denbrock is. And then when you study what he did at Cincinnati and LSU, you start to see some things that are constants there. And now I think we're going to really start to see what the Mike Denbrock offense looks like.
Yeah, it's exciting. I wrote an article about it, and I think that Notre Dame is poised to have a breakout season as far as passing goes. That's what the trends show us as far as Mike Denbrock's career has gone as an offensive coordinator. You look at what the progression that Desmond Ridder went through, and he was not as much of a prolific passer as what Jaden Daniels was. I think Desmond Ridder benefited a lot from just being in his system for 4 years. And the culmination of that was his 3,000-yard season at the end, But then you look at the jump that Jaden Daniels had, and you look at what he was able to do, and that was something that you got an idea of what Mike Denbrock wanted his offense to be. Now he has 3 guys in a quarterback room that are all battling it out, that all have the ability to push the ball down the field.
Yep. Well, like with Desmond Ridder, to put data to your point, Trevor, his first year as a starter was 2018. He passed for 2,445 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. The next year, 2019, he passes for 2,100 yards and 2164, 18 touchdowns, 9 picks, quarterback rating 123. Third year as a starter. It's a COVID year, so they only played 10 games, but the numbers don't change a whole lot. He passes for 2,296 yards, 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So the numbers don't change a lot, but you started to see the growth. 188 yards per game in his first year, 146 rating, 166.5 yards the second year, 123.7 rating. In his third year, he jumps up to 229.6. Even though, so like again, the 2296 doesn't look a lot different, but when you take the games out, 8.2 yards per completion compared to 6.7 the year before. The interception and the touchdowns don't look a lot different, but when you consider 3 less games, he went from 18.9 to 19.6. Completion percentage goes from 55.1 in 19 and 62.4 his first year to 66.2. And then he comes out as last year. He has those for 3,341 yards, 8.6 yards per attempt, 30 touchdowns, 8 picks, and he has a 158.68 quarterback rating, 238 yards per game. And then, as you pointed out, we saw a similar jump with Jaden Daniels, who at LSU averaged 8.3 yards per attempt in only 4 games in 2020. Next year, he throws 10 picks, 10 interceptions at Arizona State, passes for 7.9 yards per attempt, 183 yards per game, comes to LSU that next year. See a little bit of improvement in certain areas. Completion percentage goes up, but yards per attempt goes down because there's a lot of quick stuff. 17 touchdowns, 3 picks, 144.54 rating. clearly still developing as a quarterback. He was still a guy that wanted to throw short and wasn't comfortable with timing and different things like that. He knew he had the tools, but the tools hadn't been brought out. And then, of course, in year 2 under Mike Denbrock, he has a legendary Heisman Trophy winning season, and he completes 72% of his passes, 11.7 per attempt, 40 touchdowns, 4 picks, quarterback rating of 208.01. And he never lost the ability to still be dynamic with his legs. Still went over 1,000 yards. So you talk about that tutelage under Mike Denbrock. What did all his quarterbacks do by the end of their careers? They could throw. And Desmond Ridder did those numbers despite me talking all season about, like, this guy's not that good of a passer. He's just got really good receivers, and it's a really good system. But I'm not shocked that Desmond Ridder hasn't been in the NFL what NFL people thought he would be by drafting him in the 3rd round. And Jaden Daniels has been that, which is why he was so dominant in Denbrock's system. And we saw Denbrock have success with a redshirt freshman like Deshaun Kaiser coming off the bench in 2015. He had to go from the offense that he was trying to run with Malik, which is going to look a little bit different than the one he's going to run with Deshaun. And we saw how he was able to thrive in that regard as well. So this is a guy that has always wanted to have a passer, a guy that can drop back and throw the football. Yes, he likes guys that can also scramble and run around, but priority number 1 is, can you dominate from the pocket? That is something that Mike Denbrock wants. There's no question about it. And we're going to see that transition this season with whoever starts at quarterback.
Well, it brings up the conversation of having a balanced offense. That's been kind of the thing that's been missing from Notre Dame's offense. And yes, it is all true, like the lack of downfield passing ability, things like that, especially in big games, right? In 2023, you saw it with Central Michigan, Tennessee State, games like that where they were willing to air it out. But then you get to Ohio State, you get to Clemson, you get to Louisville, you get to Duke, and then the downfield passing attack is nowhere to be seen. And then this season, they were a little bit handicapped based on the skill set of what Riley Leonard had. It's not a knock on him. It's just.
And the time he missed in the spring.
Yeah.
And there's several factors. Yeah.
And so that plagued them. And where you are left with a lot of confidence is the fact that they still made it to the national championship despite their passing stats being where they were. And they were able to put on.
Sorry, go ahead.
They were able to put on the performances that they did in the second half against Penn State and the second half against Ohio State, even with some of the handicaps that Riley Leonard had as a downfield passer. Some of it, I think, was just a mental lapse, honestly, because once Riley got into the mindset of, all right, well, I might as well just sling it around, we saw what he did against Penn State. We saw what he did against Ohio State in the second half. So it's interesting. It's going to be awesome to see what he does with a quarterback, with really 3 quarterbacks for an entire offseason. So for all those reasons, I'm excited.
I do think, however, yes, Riley was not a guy that was just going to be a great processor. And I think part of that was being in year 1 of a system. I think that factored into it as well, and missing all the time and development. And, then Faison goes down, who he clearly liked throwing to. And then Bo Collins gets into his drops issues, and Mitchell Evans was, never the guy that you thought he was going to be. And there was different factors, and not all of them were Riley, and including the fact that Riley Leonard didn't know half the time when he dropped back if he was going to get sacked or not, or get pressured or not. I think there was a lot of things that factored into, why there were some issues. But even then, Trev, even in those situations where I don't disagree with your end result, we still saw growth throughout the year from Riley in the pass game. And we saw him at different times, even during the regular season, where he was much more willing to throw the ball down the field. We've pointed out the Virginia game as an example where, if it's not for some officiating calls, but officiating calls, but they were the proper call, but some calls that brought some things back. Riley Leonard was a much more effective quarterback in the last 2/3 of the season. You're talking about a guy that through the first 4 games of the season first 5 games of the season had 3 touchdown passes, and didn't get his first touchdown pass until the 4th game of the year. And then to see him kind of go the second half of the year where he, in the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, last 11 games of the year, he only failed to throw a touchdown pass once. That was against, I think, Georgia Tech. Yeah, Georgia Tech. And he threw at least 2 touchdown passes in 6 games during that stretch. So I I think those are all things that you look at and say, even then you saw the growth. This isn't a defense of Riley. This is more of a praise of the job that I think that Mike Denbrock and the staff did, which was, even with all the different things, the not knowing what the offensive line was going to look like and how it was going to perform and things like that, that they still got a lot of good production. And if you look at how he performed after the bye, he had on the year, Riley had a quarterback rating of 139.61, but after the bye, he was at 148.64. Far from dynamic, far from like, wow, what a great passing offense. I mean, 148, what did I say? 148.64 would have ranked last year 22nd in all of college football, which is not great, but it's a whole lot better than the 49th ranking that they had because you count the first 5 games. And that's when we saw the Notre Dame offense really take off, is when he started having more success throwing the football. Now, am I saying this to start an argument with you about, no, you're wrong, Trevor, he was good throwing the ball down the field? Nope, I'm agreeing with you. There was a lot of limitations. The point is, look what the offense looked like when he started to get going as a thrower, and I don't think he was as good of a thrower this past year as what these guys will be at some point in time in their careers. Will that be in the opener against Miami? Maybe not. We've talked about that. Talked about that yesterday. I don't think they're going to ask whoever the starting quarterback is to carry the team in September. We discussed that when we were having the Arch Manning versus C.J. Carr conversation. They're not going to ask, in my opinion, C.J. Carr to put the offense in his shoulders in the opener, because you don't need to. Why? I have 8 words to explain why you're not going to ask C.J. Carr to carry the offense, and it's not going to be because he's a redshirt freshman. It's not going to be because he doesn't have this or doesn't have that. Here's my 8 words: Jeremiah, Love, Jadarian, Price, Aeneas, Williams, Kedron, Young. That's why. Whether it's CJ, Kenny, Steve, whoever, they don't need to be stars in the openers, but they're going to have a full offseason of work, which Riley didn't have. They're going to have 2 years now in the system, which Riley didn't have. They're going to know their teammates a lot better going into winter workouts, which Riley didn't. He knew one guy on the team, RJ Oben. That's it. Really knew. He probably played against Bo Collins and those, but really knew. And so there's all these advantages to it that Riley didn't have. But even with Riley, you saw the growth down the stretch. You saw what that offense looked like when he started throwing the ball. He came out slinging early against Navy, and you were just like, well, this one's over. You kind of knew that game was going to be over after the first drive. You're like, okay, Riley's throwing the ball down the field. Riley's hitting post routes over the middle. You guys have no chance. I don't care what you do. You have no chance. And that's the part that, to me, that starts to get excited about. Like, if they can do that regularly, because the run game's not going anywhere, fellas. Run game's not going anywhere. But, man, it starts getting kind of exciting. But that's what the Denbrock offense is about, Trev. That's what you start kind of getting fired up about. And I'm actually looking at Riley's quarterback rating in the semifinals and championship game, and he had a quarterback rating of over 153 in those 2 games. The problem was he waited till the second half to do it. But we saw in the second halves, the point being that, there are weapons on this offense.
Oh, yeah.
They can give the quarterback time to throw, and they can rip up good secondaries as long as the quarterback lets her rip. And that's that had we not seen that, I don't know that I'd have the same level of excitement going into this offseason. If we didn't see Jordan Faison do what he did in the playoff, if we didn't see Jaden Greathouse do what he did in the playoff, and even Eli Raritan doing the playoff, I might have a different view of my excitement level for this team. It would just be like, well, I hope these quarterbacks can do it, because I don't know what they're going to. You know what I mean? But now it's like, you saw that. Now you look at the quarterback and you say, okay, now we're going to really get to see what a Mike Denbrock offense looks like, because I respect the heck out of the fact that he did what he needed to do with the talent he had, Trev. But you brought Mike Denbrock in here to run his offense, and we're going to get one step closer to that next season. And this quarterback battle is going to be a big part of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to look more balanced. And that's the thing that I'm really excited about. Everything that you said just all feeds back into Notre Dame having a balanced offense. You look at the two teams like Ohio State and Notre Dame, the two teams that played in the national championship on the 20th. And they were known for two very different things. Notre Dame was known for their run game. Jeremiah Love, Riley Leonard, Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams. Ohio State was known for their downfield passing game because they had Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate, and Travion Henderson took a screen pass 75 yards on the last play of the first half in the Cotton Bowl against Texas. But where did those two offenses shine? Ohio State was able to run the football against Notre Dame. Quinshon Judkins ripped off a 70-yard run. Notre Dame was able to push the ball down the field and throw the ball in the second half. Riley Leonard passed for over 200 yards in 2 quarters. So you go through and you start looking at what does that mean? It's offenses are the best when they're balanced. We said it all playoffs. Yes, Steve Sarkisian's a genius mind, and Quinn Ewers can let it fly when he's given the time, and they have a bunch of different receiving weapons. They're at their best when they can run the football and remain balanced. Ohio State, for all the weapons they have on the perimeter, they're at their best when they can run the football. And not run the football in Notre Dame's sense where they're going for 240 a game and rushing for 3 rushing touchdowns a game, but when they're able to establish that. And I believe that that's what the Mike Denbrock offense is going to be at Notre Dame, because there's a lot of people that think, okay, now that Riley Leonard isn't in South Bend anymore and we're not going to see 9 or 10 design quarterback runs, they're now going to throw the football 55 times a game. It's not going to look like a vintage Washington State type of game where it's going to be, all right, well, CJ Carr or Kenny or Steve just had 62
It's going to be the Fiesta Bowl
attempts
every week. It's going to be the 21 Fiesta Bowl every single week, man.
Right.
That's what it's going to look like. No.
Right.
No,
Right.
it will not.
When Mike Denbrock is in his bag and the quarterback's in a groove, it is very balanced, and it is a very balanced attack. You saw that in the second half against Penn State when they were able to start opening up the run game to rip off big runs, when Riley Leonard was pushing the ball down the field to Jaden Greathouse. So it's all going to be a part of the offense that he wants to run, man.
There are a few things that I want to see from the quarterbacks this spring. Number one, willingness to throw the ball down the field. Now, people need to understand what you and I mean by that. We do not mean that you come out and run 4 verts, 3 out of your 4 pass plays. We do not mean how many different ways can I design post routes to be thrown. It's when those opportunities present themselves, be willing to take it. And then as you have a quarterback that's more comfortable to do that, Trevor, then you can throw the football more and you can be more aggressive, which then softens teams up, which opens up a lot of other things, because an aggressive defense coming down doesn't just impact the run game. It impacts your short and intermediate pass game as well. You have to be willing to take those chances and beat those teams down the field, and then what that does for you. So obviously a willingness and ability to get the ball down the field. An offense where the decision-making is quicker. That was my biggest knock on Riley at times, was he wasn't a quick decision maker. There was a level of, you could tell when he wasn't comfortable, and you could see it early, Trev. I mean, like first quarter against Florida State, you're like, he's not feeling it today. He's not feeling the reads today. He's not feeling the process. He was just missing real simple reads, and it worked for Riley because he was a playmaker. He could miss a read and then scramble around for a 40-yard touchdown. I mean, that's who he was. These guys are not that. These guys have to be more, make the initial right decision. That doesn't mean I'm throwing to the X. Sometimes the initial right decision, and you and I talked about this when we were breaking down a couple of playoff games, is he should have read right instead of left, because if he reads right, he's got 2 on 2, whereas right, he's got 3 over 2. And if he reads the right to the field, the double slant, Jordan Faison's coming open in the catch and run opportunity. I mean, it's things like that too, where it's not just the timing and all that. It's you picked the wrong side to even read. And some of those quick throws where if you're running like snag on the boundary and you're running double slants right, you're not coming back to the double slant. You don't throw blind to a double slant. You've got to read it right now. And they're half field reads. They're meant to be read, check down, or read, scramble. They're not meant to be whole field reads where you read the snag left and then you come back to the slant. Now, sometimes the slant can kind of, if a receiver's smart, he sees the quarterback's not throwing him the ball, he'll level off and work in forward of the quarterback's face. That's fine. But that's not part of the design of the play. Now, if I'm running a 3x1 and I'm running a slot fade with a backside dig, then I'm reading to the dig side, right? I read the corner for the slot fade to the hitch. If it's not there, and I know I don't have the option route based on pre-snap look, I may then come back because I know, well, hey, that guy, that middle linebacker's over here running with my, running with this. I know that backside dig is going to open up. And so you'll see that. And that's, who was the best at that in the spring last year? CJ Carr. He was the best at getting to that backside dig. That's the full field reads, but those are on more downfield type of concepts. But that's something we need to see more of from quarterbacks. With Riley, you were not going to get the ton of that. You did at times, but it was more going to be read the half field. If it's not there, he's either checking it down or he's taking off running. Well, these quarterbacks are going to be different. So I need to see better decision-making pre-snap, then being more willing to get the ball out in space to your playmakers. But then also, Trev, they've got to be better at attacking the intermediate part of the game, of the field. Has to happen. Absolutely has to happen. What's funny is Riley was a lot better at that than Steve was, because Steve was go routes or check downs, but it's still not where it needs to be. There's still, and we broke this down a week or so ago. We don't need to react, but that's something that I want to see is more of the stops, the comebacks, the outcuts, the digs, the curl routes. Things were there. There was 3 curl routes that just flat out should have been banged in the championship game. Just easy, you call them stop. I guess they're more stop routes, but it's curl flat concept, but they're more stop routes as opposed to like the post curl type of thing. It's just 15 and stop or 12 and stop. They're open. Dude, second drive of the game, first drive of the game, Chris Mitchell should have had 4 or 5 catches just on curls and hitches, and he was open, and Riley missed him twice. First play of the third quarter, Jaden Greathouse wide open on a curl. Riley reads wrong side, tries to come back to him, but he comes back to him late. Like, those things are part of that intermediate zone that we're talking about. And then, of course, being able to hit the seams and hit the overs and things like that, which we didn't see a lot of. We saw it at times. He hit one against Louisville. He hit one against Ohio State on a 3rd and 9. So we saw at times Riley could hit that throw. It was there. You just got to get to it more. So, like, those type of things, that's really where I really want to see this pass offense evolve. And I think all 3 quarterbacks have the physical tools to get there. I think 2 of them have shown in the times we've seen them play more of a willingness and an ability to hit that, and that's Kenny and Steve and CJ, where Steve has been more of a go route versus one-on-one or check down. That's been more of his game, and I've broken down the reasons why. But those aspects of it that you've got to get better at, and I think you have quarterbacks more built to that, because even though Kenny can run, Kenny's a passer. Kenny is a really smart passing quarterback who happens to also be athletic. CJ is the same way. And Steve is that way to a degree. So I do think we're going to see more of that stuff from the pass offense this year, Trevor. I think we're going to see more things where the ball gets on the perimeter. All that type of stuff is you're going to see there's been a lot of things built into the pass game that was there that they never got to this year.
Yeah.
Because you had a different type of quarterback. Not bad, because what Riley was really good at what he did. But now you're going to see more of that stuff this season from the pass offense because of the quarterbacks you're going to have.
Yeah, man. With Riley, it felt like a lot of the downfield passing game and the intermediate passing game, which really in the confines that we're talking about it is almost one and the same. I think one of the reasons why there was just a lack of it early on in games, especially taking the Orange Bowl and the national championship into account, is I literally think at times, and you could tell based on his read progression, sometimes the ball was coming out right when he hit the top of his drop. As I think for the reasons that you were just saying, it had been open all game. Denbrock finally was just like, hey, you hit the top of your drop and you throw it to this person, they're going to be open. Like, that's literally, if you go back through and you watch some of the games, that's what it was. On that 3rd down play to Jaden Greathouse, like, there was no other read. Riley made a heck of a throw because he was under pressure and had a man in his face, but the ball was going there the entire time. Yeah, not necessarily like staring down the read, but that's where it was pre-decided before the ball was snapped that that's where the ball was going. And what left me so excited after watching the spring game this past season is you could see with Kenny and CJ's progression, especially with CJ, is it didn't have to be. He was truly seeing the field. It wasn't before the play, Mike Denbrock was, hey, you should peek backside because Deion Colsey's coming wide open on a 13-yard backside dig. It was just CJ knew that it was going to be there. So that's the difference, right? And so that's one thing that's going to be really awesome to see. I'm pumped for it, man. I'm pumped for it.
I want to give some data too to this conversation, Trevor, because I think at the end of the day, what are we talking about here? What goes into being a championship football team? And I think there's a lot of different ways to win. I know we get wrapped up a lot of times, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to be able to do this. And my answer is you got to be able to do a lot of things well to win a championship, a lot of things well. And part of it's you got to play good defense, right? You've got to have some balance as a football team. You've got to be able to do this. You've got to be able to do that. You got to not be a team that turns the ball over a million times. There's the anomalies, the exceptions like 2017 Clemson or 2016 Clemson. But more often than not, there's certain traits. Well, you know what? One trait that we've seen in the last 10 years, actually, let me go back the last 8 years. It's this. This is the quarterback rating for offenses in the last 8 years of the college football era for the national champion. 171.55, 165.77, 161.98, 168.57, 198.99, 197.40, 154.65, that was with a true freshman, 155.99. That was in 2017. Let me give you Notre Dame's quarterback ratings in the last 8 years during that same stretch of time, and you'll realize only one of those years they came close to that. They were at 140.56 this year, 165.39 last year. The starter was at 159.5, but you couldn't do that in the games that mattered. 147.23 the year before, 149.99 the year before that, 141.94, 153.48. That was in 19 against a weak schedule. 143.32, 120.29, and 142.10. Right? So that number to me matters a whole lot more than how many yards per game you passed for. I want to see the quarterback rating and I want to see the yards per attempt. Those numbers have to get a lot better because I could do the same exact thing when I look at the national champions, Trevor, and point to what they were doing in the pass offense, in a yards per attempt standpoint. And again, Michigan was a very different team than Ohio State. Very different team. I mean, you and I would agree on that, correct? I mean, they were not a team that threw the ball a ton. They were not a team. I mean, they only averaged 213 passing yards per game this past year, the year they won it, where Ohio State averaged 263. And Georgia averaged 295.8 the year before. But you know what Michigan did? They were top 10 in quarterback rating, and their offense averaged 8.9 yards per pass attempt. Ohio State this year was at 9.2. Georgia was at 9.0 in 22. They were at 9.3 in 21. Bama was at 11.0 in 20. That's not going to happen. Again, 19. LSU was at 10.6. 18. Clemson, with a true freshman, was one of the lower ones. Let me find Clemson. They were still at 8.2. 2017 with Alabama, that was another bit of an anomaly year, still at 8.2. And then in 2016 with Clemson, I think they were the last one. No, they were still in the 8s as well. And then you look at Notre Dame this past season, and they were at 7.1. I mean, those are the things that you look at and say, 2022, you're at 8.0. Part of that was because Davis Sherwood had a pass that went for over 20 that helped you out. You're at 8.1 in 2021. You were at 7.9 in 2020, 7.9 in 2019, only 8.0 in 2018, 6.6 in 2017. So in most years, your average year was like the bottom level of what championship teams were doing. So yes, you need to do other things, but you have to be an efficient pass offense that has big play capability. Doesn't mean you have to do it 18 times a game. Michigan would not hit a lot of big plays, but you go back and look at the Ohio State game in 2023. What broke that game open in the second half? A couple big plays over the top in the pass game. And Cornelius Johnson hit a couple, and then you had Loveland hit a big pass play. That's because Ohio State was like, hey, we're going to shut down your run game. And they were able to find ways to get the big plays down the field. Against Alabama in the semifinals, what did Michigan do? Hit some big pass plays over the middle, had some catch and runs. We're able to find ways to be balanced, be efficient and explosive. Volume of passing is not what I care about. Efficiency and explosiveness is what I care about. And you're going into part of the transition we talked about earlier as we wrap this up, and we'll actually get into the specific battle next. But you're transitioning to an era where the expectation is, because of the talent you have at quarterback, because of the offensive coordinator you have, and the skill talent you're putting around it. Right now, portal needs to help with that, but high school recruiting needs to help with it even more also. But you're in a situation where those numbers need to start going up and up and up and getting on the level of what we've seen from championship teams in the past. I don't give one rip about how many yards they throw for on average. I don't care as much about how many attempts per game they have, because that varies from team to team. What I care about is, what is your efficiency and explosiveness when you do throw the ball on the season as a whole, but especially in the big games. And you go look at Notre Dame's yards per attempt in the first half against Penn State, it was abysmal. You go look at Notre Dame's yards per attempt in the second half against Penn State, and you know exactly why they scored 24 points in 30 minutes. Despite the fact they still couldn't really run the ball that well. They had that first drive, they ran the ball well, but they weren't really ripping them up. It just softened Penn State up, and then Riley took that game over.
Yeah.
But it was because of your ability to throw the football efficiently with some explosiveness. That's what changed. Same thing in the second half against Ohio State.
Well, and some of the numbers, too, just to put it into context and frame of what it means for Notre Dame, is with pass efficiency numbers and yards per attempt, they went up under Mike Denbrock regimes, too. You go back through and you look at what Cincinnati did in 2017 in his first year with Desmond Ridder. 6.0 yards per attempt, passer rating of 117.8. By the time that he was done, they had 8.4 yards per attempt and a passer rating of 157.9. At LSU, from 2022 to 2023, they went from 7.5 yards per attempt and a quarterback passer rating of 140.7 to, in 2023, 10.7 yards per attempt that led college football and a passer rating of 192.5, which also led college football. So all of those numbers that Bryan laid out and that indicated, those are the trends that Mike Denbrock has had with his offenses and with his quarterback specifically, when he's had time to develop them, when he's had time to groom them, which is all reasons why this quarterback battle is going to be really fun to dive into.
Now, LSU won 0 championships during that stretch, right? Because it shows you need to be able to do other things. You have to play like this thing called defense. But the point is, but the offense did their part. I mean, you and I talked about this I think it was I can't remember who I did the show with, but we said, could you imagine if you took the 23 LSU offense and put it with the 23 Notre Dame defense? Like, that team would have been insane, insanely good. But he did his part, and Matt House didn't do his. Brian Kelly didn't do his. You hope that the other side's going to do their part at Notre Dame. You hope that that's going to be the case, and you feel confident that that'll happen when Marcus Freeman is the head coach. But that's where Marcus Freeman is trying to take this offense. And again, I don't care if it's 30 passes a game on average or 22 passes a game on average. I don't care if your quarterback goes 16 of 22 for 240 yards, or if he goes 30 of 43 for 500 or 402 yards. I don't care. As long as the yards per attempt, the efficiency is in that range that I think a championship offense looks like. And I come to that conclusion not by how I feel about it. Let's look at the numbers. The numbers tell you what it is. The offenses in a lot of those different years look very different, but the numbers are still were what they were. And even Michigan was not in an anomaly where, well, everybody else did that, but no, Michigan still was a top 10 caliber team in quarterback rating and yards per attempt. They just didn't throw the ball as much. They were a running team that played great defense, but their pass game was still efficient and had explosive capability. Absolutely.
So, Bryan, we're going to get ready to dive into the battle specifically. We talked big picture. We've talked what it means for Mike Denbrock's impact. So let's go through and break down the quarterback battle specifically with all the people involved. But listen, folks, before we get there, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame football and college football as much as you do. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.